Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Curiosity Conversation with your host, Jimmy Cerrone. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we're going to talk about the structure of the Enneagram. In my last video, we talked about what the Enneagram was and why it's so special. And today, we're going to break that down in more depth. So, we're going to talk about four things. Talk about the instinctual centers of the Enneagram. We're going to talk about the wings. We're going to talk about directions of integration and disintegration. And finally, we're going to touch briefly on subtypes. My goal here is to really show you how the Enneagram can capture your whole personality and really view you as a unique person. But also, I want to cut through the jargon that covers the Enneagram and makes it hard to understand. So let's get right to it. Let's start with instinctual centers. Now you can see these highlighted areas are our centers. You've got head types, body types, and heart types. Now these centers are either what you're really connected to or very disconnected to. So for example, both 8 and 9 are in the body type, or the body center, but 8s are deeply connected to their bodies, actually in sometimes harmful ways, and 9s are deeply disconnected from their bodies and require practices like dance and yoga to really get back in touch with their own physical selves. So those are our instinctual centers. Now let's move on to the wings. Once again, we can see it visually here, the structure. I'm going to talk about the wings of the 7 because that's what I am. So 7s are right next to 8 and 6, and those are the wings of the 7. So wings are simply the numbers to the left or right of your number. What's super cool about wings is they can really help you see your uniqueness. So for example, a 7-wing 6, which like me, is totally different than a 7-wing 8. 7-wing 6 is going to be more concerned with security and maybe even more critical in some ways. And a 7-wing 8 is going to be much more dominant and powerful and less kind of influenced by fear, at least outwardly, than a 7-wing 6. So it shows it can really change the way your type presents to everyone else. And usually you lean on one wing more than the other. So I lean more on my 6-wing. I would love to really integrate the beautiful power of the 8-wing, but I'm not quite there yet. So we talked about instinctual centers and also wings, and now we're going to get into directions of integration and disintegration. Basically, these tell you what you act like when you're stressed or when you're growing. So for me, again, as a type 7, when I'm stressed, I move towards type 1. I become a little bit of a perfectionist. I'm critical. I'm a little bit mean about the way I approach things, and I get very order conscious, which is totally against my nature. When I'm growing, however, I have a sense of order, but it's through a focus and an intentionality that comes from a really calm, grounded place. So it's a very different way of acting out maybe some of the same goals I'm trying to when I'm in stress and move towards 1. So once again, this tells us a lot about ourselves. It can be really powerful in helping us grow. Now the final thing I'm going to touch briefly on is the subtypes. So each of the 9 types has 3 ways of showing up. And that's the sexual subtype, the social subtype, and the self-preservation subtype. Basically, these tell us what matters to us, what's important, and that changes a lot about the way we act. So, just reviewing really quickly here, in the Enneagram, we have a lot of powerful ways of understanding ourselves as unique human beings. We can look at our instinctual center, where we act from or where we're disconnected from, our head, our heart, or our body. We can look at our little wings and understand where we lean sometimes and new characteristics we're able to take on. We can further understand our complexity by seeing where we go in stress and where we grow to in comfortable, helpful environments. And finally, we can really further understand ourselves by looking at our motivations in our subtype. Now, I've linked some resources in the comments or in the description for more information. I would highly recommend the Sleeping at Last podcast the Liturgists podcast, and also the Enneagram Institute. I've got links to all those below. Check those out to learn more. And of course, ask me any questions you have. Thank you for joining me for another Curiosity Conversation.